Good afternoon, my dear students, my dear colleagues, and in today's lesson we're going to talk about the subject and aims of the history of English and chronological divisions in the history of English. Yes. So let's start our lesson. Every living language is subjected to growth and decay. Its modern state is a result of manifold changes and the transformations which it underwent in the course of its history, in the course of its development. In the structure of every language, both the diachronic elements, remnants of old conjunctions, decisions, and the new elements reflecting the latest trends in its development. Old words die out, fall out of the vocabulary, and the new words are added, often due to external influences, borrowings to the development of science and the culture. For example, telephone, and we must add ed, a new element will be yes. For example, write, fight, take, a diachronic element. So, the history of the language is that branch of linguistic science, which gives you an insight into the origin of modern English, which explains to you the history of its phonological structure, the difficulties of its spelling, the composition of its vocabulary, the peculiarities of its grammatical structure, which language can be considered from different angles. In studying modern English, we regard the language as fixed in time and describe each linguistically, phonetics, grammar, or lexis, synchronologically, taking no account of the origin of present-day features or their tendencies to change. The synchronic approach can be contrasted to the diachronic. When considered diachronically, every linguistic fact is interpreted as a step in the never-ending evolution of language. The English language of today reflects many centuries of development. One of the aims of its course is to provide the student with knowledge of linguistic history, sufficient to account for the principal features of present-day English, and to show how modern linguistic features can be explained by resorting to history. Any student of English is well aware of difficulties of reading and spelling English. The written form of the English word is conventional rather than phonetic. For example, beat, yes, 3 letters, 3 sounds. Full correspondence between Latin letters and the English sounds. Bite, 4 letters, 3 sounds. No correspondence between the vowels and the graphic representation. Night, 6 letters, 3 sounds. The letters K and the GH don't stand for any sounds, but GH evidently shows that I stands for I. The illustration from the vocabulary. English belongs to the Germanic group of language. It has many words or roots in common with cognate Germanic languages. English, for example, give, as a Germanic language given, giver, yes, for example. Romance language, no. So, English peace, as a Germanic language Frieden, Fred, Dutch will be Frede. Romance language face will be father, also maybe. For example, English army, yes, as the German language here, her, Romance language armia, armata. So, history of grammar. Explanation was for the German general regular features of the grammatical structure and for its specific peculiarities and exceptions. Why English has so few inflections? How its analytical structure arose with an abundance of compound forms and a fixed word order. Why modal verbs, unlike as verbs, take no ending s in the third? Why some nouns end en or change the root vowel in the plural instead of adding s? For example, oxen, feet, and so on. and the subforms. Theoretical nature of the history of English. For example, a number of theoretical questions such as the relationship between statics and the dynamics in language, the role of linguistic and extra-linguistic factors, the interdependence of different processes in language history, a wider philological outlook. The history of English language shows the place of English in the linguistic world. It reveals its ties and the contacts with other related and unrelated tongues. Sources of language history. Every living language as a means of human communication is a social and historical phenomenon, and it changed through time, especially subjected to change in the older periods of its history until it became fixed by the rapid spread of literature, press, radio, and the constant human intercourse. No records of linguistic change have ever been kept, as most changes pass and are noticed by contemporaries. The history of the English language has been reconstructed on the basis of written records of different periods. The earliest extant of written texts in English are dated in the 7th. The earliest records in other Germanic languages go back to the 3rd or 4th CED. The development of English, however, began a long time before it was recorded. Where the English language came from, to what language it's related, when and how it has acquired its specific features. Some facts of the pre-written history of the Germanic group. Certain information about the early stages of English and Germanic history, the works of ancient historians and geographers, especially Roman. Descriptions of Germanic tribes' personal names and the place names. Some data also provided by early bearings from Germany made by other languages, for example the Finnish and the Baltic languages. But the bulk of knowledge comes from scientific study of extant texts. The pre-written history of English and the cognate languages. First studies by methods of comparative linguistics evolved in the 9th. Linguistics discovered the kinship of what is known as the Indo-European family of language and grouped them into Germanic, Slavonic, Romance, Celtic, and others. It's one of the intentions of this course to show how comparison of existing and constructed forms can demonstrate differences and similarities in language, and how reconstructed forms help to understand late developments. Modern linguistics has improved on the methods of comparative linguistic research applied in the 90s. External reconstruction based on the comparing different languages. The recent formulated methods of internal reconstruction. The evolution of historical development of language is made up of diverse facts and processes. In the first place, it includes the internal or structural development of the language system, its various subsystems and component parts. The description of ancient linguistic history is usually presented in accordance with the division of language into linguistic levels. The main commonly accepted levels are the phonetic and phonological levels. The second one is morphological level. The third one is the syntactic level. The fourth one is the lexical level. Accordingly, the history of the language can be subdivided into historical phonetics, phonology will be, historical morphology, historical syntax, and historical lexicology. The evolution of language includes also many facts which pertain to the functioning of language in the speech community. These functional aspects constitute what's known as the external or outer history of the language, and this embraces a large number of diverse matters. The spread of the language in geographical and social space, the differentiation of language into functional varieties. Geographical variants, dialect, standard, and the standard forms, and etc. Context with other languages. The concepts of language space, the geographical and the social space occupied by the language, known as its horizontal and the vertical dimensions. The concept of linguistic situation, the functional differentiation of language and the relationships between the functional varieties. Most of these features are connected with the history of the speech community, for example, with the structure of society, the migration of tribes, and the economic and the political events, the growth of culture and the literature. Although certain changes constantly occur at one or another linguistic level, the historical development of language cannot be regarded as permanent instability. Many features of the language remain static in diachrony. These constant features don't alter through time or may be subject to very slight alteration. Certain permanent universal properties to be found in all languages at any period of time, such as, for example, division of sounds into vowels and the consonants, the distinction between the main parts of speech and the parts of the sentence. Many stable characteristics, for instance, some parts of the English vocabulary have been preserved through ages. Yes, to the stable part belong most of the pronouns, maybe form words and the words indicating the basic concepts of life. Many ways of word formation have remained historically stable. Some grammatical categories, for example, number in nouns, degrees of comparison in adjectives, have suffered little alteration, while other categories such as case or gender have undergone profound changes. The proportion of stable and the changeable features varies at different historical periods and at different linguistic levels, but there is no doubt that we can find statics and dynamics both in synchrony and diachrony. Dynamics in diachrony, linguistic changes. Linguistic changes are usually slow and gradual. They proceed in minor and perceptible steps, and noticed by the speakers. Unlike human society, language undergoes no revolutions or sudden breaks. The slow rate of linguistic change is seen in the gradual spread of new features in language space. Different parts of levels of language develop at different rates. Vocabulary of a language can change very rapidly. This is true only if you compare lexical changes with changes at other linguistic levels, for example, grammatical. Yes? Lexical changes are easy to observe. The system of phonemes cannot be subjected to sudden or rapid changes, since it must preserve the oppositions between the phonemes required for the distinction of morphemes. Sometimes phonetic changes affect a whole set of sounds, a group of vowels or group of consonants, but as a rule, they don't impair the differentiation of phonemes. Being the most abstract of linguistic levels, it must provide stable formal devices for arranging words into classes and for connecting them into phrases and sentences. English among other languages of the world. Languages can be classified according to different principles, with historical or genealogical classification groups languages in accordance with their origin from a common linguistic ancestor. Genetically, English belongs to the Germanic or Teutonic group of languages, which is one of the 12 groups of the linguistic family. So, in this card, we can see the Germanic groups of languages. So north, west, east.